Primary Night, May 23rd, 2018 is the title of our episode from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. It was an interesting night. We'll start this out from the Washington Post and some Democrats that were able to win last night in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Amy McGrath, the first Marine woman to fly an F-18 fighter, won for a key House seat in Lexington over the candidate favored there in Lexington. Looking at this was the mayor of Lexington, Jim Gray. Gray was endorsed by the Democratic Congressional Committee. A number there, just looking at some of the results in that race. McGirt led Gray 49 to 41% with 95% of the votes in. She'll take on Andy Barr that in that particular legislative district in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. She's an energizing candidate, no doubt about that. Little more pizzazz recruited in there. And according to, Jim Yarmish, a Democratic representative, she showed she could mount a campaign whose source said helped talk Gray into the race, told this is TPM here. People are taking her a lot more seriously than they did early on. Republicans started to paint her as a hardline progressive in the wake of her victory. But McGirt has her credentials as a fighter pilot, and at one time in American politics, just the credential itself would catapult you into the national spotlight, as it did John McCain. And that'll be an interesting race there. This Andy Barr character has been around for a very, very long time in Kentucky politics. I forget how many years he's been in the House of Representatives, but his name has appeared quite a few times. And it'll be interesting if she can mount a campaign. Now, the mayor of Lexington, a known quantity there, she beat him. It looks like about 8 percentage points. Don't have the final tally on this, but interesting race within itself where she has come from in this particular race. We had a number of races out here in the state of Georgia. Stacey Abrams easily won her primary over another Stacey there in the state of Georgia. And she had been the minority leader there and in Georgia. And if she is successful, will be the first African-American governor of a state in the U.S. So she's moving on a progressive agenda here in Georgia. She's a known quantity there in the state of Georgia. It'll be a very interesting situation to see how she can do. The last governor was a middle-of-the-roader named Barnes, but that was, I believe, about 16 years ago. But Barnes was in the governor's chair there in Georgia. Now they've had some conservative types as Georgia governor since Jimmy Carter. But Jimmy Carter in the 70s was a progressive at the time, and he was the governor of Georgia, and then later, of course, president of the United States. So Stacey Abrams was endorsed by the quote-unquote Democratic establishment. Old Hillary Clinton finally endorsed her, and it was endorsed by Bernie Sanders and his group there. as a progressive candidate. What's very important in all of these races is running on issues. And she's running on affordable health care. And, of course, at the same time, Georgia values family, country, etc. And what is now called sensible gun legislation, not controlled. They dropped that word out because it's really not controlled. It's just things like registrations, tightening up the registration requirements, which doesn't mean a lot when you have millions of guns already out there, literally. But in terms of cosmetic a situation, it will, and it will forestall some people that have not already bought a dozen guns from buying 2 dozen guns, is the way you look at it. That's in the 6th district, incidentally, of the Commonwealth of Kentucky there. And back to Cara Eastman in Nebraska, mentioning her there. This is a district, incidentally, and I'm kind of skipping around here, in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, that this Garland Andy Barr, that DJ Trump won by 15%. I wouldn't count that as much because it's a situation in that the competition there was Hillary the Monster Clinton, not a lot of competition, and then the turnout was a little bit different type of turnout. And we also have, let's see here, neighboring a 7th district, we have Lucy McGrath there, and as a neighboring a 7th, and David Kim. Clark Tucker defeated several more living candidates in Arkansas. The other competitive House race there bid after running campaign ads that forced his focused on a battle to overcome cancer that was in Arkansas. So we've had some very interesting races out here. And in Texas, the Texas Dallas County Sheriff Lupe Valdez is running for governor against a wheelchair Abbott. She defeated Andrew White, the son of the former governor Mark White, days gone by. She is an openly gay person running there in Texas. But Ortiz Jones now is an interesting person. These are some of the winners here. A Filipino Air Force Intelligence Officer Jenna Ortiz Jones, and a African American civil rights lawyer who once was in the NFL, Colin Allred. Both emerged from a crowded field that included rivals with deep experience in government and party politics. Now, our one progressive went down in defeat, Laura Moser. That's in the Houston area there. She was defeated by Lizzie Fletcher. Fletcher is an attorney there in Houston. But at least, as they say, we ran a campaign, period. So a lot of women out here. This is from the Post Roundup that ran, period. Seb Morton, he's in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who had recruited and helped raise money for veteran turned candidate, said McGrath, who was a force to be reckoned with in Kentucky. Although Democrats, as we said earlier, recruited her rival Gray. And a lot of this is changing here. The Arkansas primary here, I don't know what we have. It's Asa Hutchins on the other side there in Arkansas. We'll have to skip Arkansas. And somewhere here we have the Moser defeat here. Fletcher was at 68% to 32%. For Moser, Moser was attacked blindsidedly by the Democratic Congressional Committee, saying nasty things about her. And in this particular district, that was the Achilles heel. She was no doubt the most progressive candidate in the race. But even people like this TP fake progressive operation came out against her in a what can be looked at as a hatchet job, no doubt about that. It's interesting how some of these national organizations do hatchet jobs. We have a roundup here, which you'll hear from WFAA in Atlanta, Georgia, on the race there. Excuse me. This is WFAA ABC in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas race there. They're about that. We do have from Stacey Abrams in the various Atlanta TV stations contributing to that particular situation there. But Valdez, driven all over Texas, is going to be a very interesting race there. And it all boils down to turnout, no doubt about that, period. And White just could not get the votes out, the base of the Democratic Party. One of the things to look at, of course, in Texas is that the Democratic Party in Texas is rebuilding. And it will take a number of years to rebuild the party back to its glory day when Lyndon Baines Johnson was still around. So you'll see some very interesting situations in the race for governor there. We were looking at some polling there. Lion Ted Cruz versus Mr. O'Rourke out of El Paso, Texas. O'Rourke is out of there. It was a 7-point race, but Cruz's favorables, as in the Senate, are not that good. And the situation with Beto O'Rourke is he's not well known outside of El Paso. He will be much better known. We're in May now, come the fall campaign. So that is one of the things we can, we can look to, no doubt about it. One other thing here while we are here, and we'll do the sports. I think we can find it, perhaps. This is an attack on our revolution here in Nina Turner. Now, this has been driving home here. Nina Turner, former representative in Ohio. See, in a statement Tuesday, Turner, the group's president, noted that the comments by Figaro, Tasselin Figaro, were not held by Turner or Our Revolution on Fox last year. Figaro cited Trump's leadership on the travel ban and said we are sick and tired of immigrants coming into the country and getting benefits that Americans do not get. What I am seeing is not paying taxes. What I'm seeing is getting a lot of freebies that Americans do not get. That's an absolute lie. Figaro is kind of, I looked at her past, has had some successes and not some successes. There's one way of putting it, period. Turner's statement went on to cite Figaro's tweet on Monday afternoon apologizing for her comments and stated that Figaro is still part of our staff, though the matter is under advisement by myself and Our Revolution board of directors. Figaro wrote a 7-part tweet statement on Monday after the story in Politico. I offer no excuse, but I call into question the motivation of people who spoke out about her association with our revolution. A lot of inside politics going on here, and it is unfortunate. But the whole idea here is one situation that is to cause many problems. The original article by the same author here talked about the disorganization of our revolution. Well, our revolution has endorsed many candidates, and by local Our Revolution chapters, and Bernie Sanders has endorsed some also, as in the case of Dennis Kucinich. Now, Dennis Kucinich, a longtime progressive, former representative in Ohio, ran for governor. He came up short, but he still got 20-something% of the vote. Didn't have a lot of money, but he was correct on the issues. So that we stand by, period. Lucy Flores, former Nevada Assembly a woman, resigned because of Figueroa's promotion was nicked, and called the decision to keep Figueroa on incredibly disappointing. Flores left the group out of concern that Our Revolution wasn't paying enough attention to Latino issues. Well, if that is the case, it has to be corrected, no doubt about that. Period. So will Figueroa remain around? That's a very tenuous situation. Normally in these situations, because of the heat coming out, Ms. Turner and company would be well advised to send Figueroa packing. Now, Catalina Vesquez, an undocumented immigrant who is on the board, said about Figueroa, problems are there. With this particular issue, Figueroa needs to be fired immediately, and Senator Turner needs to address the serious situation, legitimate concern. No doubt it is a legitimate concern, and with Nina Turner not really wanting to throw Figueroa under the bus, but at the same time, it is a huge liability, becoming a distraction, period. So it is a situation that Ms. Turner needs to correct. You just don't want this type of story out there. It's not a situation like what happened with the good senator from Minnesota, Al Franken, but at the same time, this situation is something we can ill afford at Our Revolution. And I understand Figueroa working as a political consultant and working with Fox News and the various other characters to make a living, but it was an unfortunate comment, and it's one of those situations that we just can ill afford to happen, period. That's about the only thing we can say about this situation here, and it has to stop. No doubt she apologized, but many times it's just not enough in this political situation that we now find ourselves in. When you're a progressive board, you're always going to have these problems that pop up because of these establishment operations like Politico and others are taking shots at you on a daily basis. No doubt about that. So when you have that kind of situation, you have to put yourself in a position not to take cannon fire unnecessarily. Now this is interesting from Jimmy Carter here. Jimmy Carter says old DJ Trump has a shot at a Nobel Peace Prize. This is by the same guy that wrote the article there, Edward Isaac Doré. If Korea goes well, he says it could be a Nobel Prize in his future. He was in Lynchburg, Virginia, evidently said even though he believed Trump has already dealt a damaging blow to peace in the Mideast by moving the embassy from Tel Aviv, legitimate Zionist capital, to Jerusalem. The former president spent 37 years since he left office on humanitarian types of missions. Said he let others judge whether the current occupant of Oval Office is a moral leader. We don't want to get into being this moral leader thing, period. That in itself is not a very good situation. Now, for years, comparisons to Jimmy Carter have been used as an epithet in politics. Even Jimmy Carter would have given the order for a raid that killed Osama bin Laden. That's what Willard Romney said in 2012. In remarks introducing Carter, that was on Saturday, Jerry Falwell Jr. invoked a comparison between Carter and Trump, meant as a compliment to both. Was one of the early prominent conservative leaders, this is Falwell Jr., that endorsed Trump. Falwell said he thought about how both Carter and Trump came in as outsiders in the same entrenched elites Jesus Christ opposed, oh boy. Looking out at the Liberty football field, with a new upper deck is prepared to move into Division I football there. He said back to hear Carter speak at the opening of the Billy Graham Library. That was in 2007. Jimmy Carter was there in Lynchburg. On the stage at Liberty an hour after the interview, Carter sat next to Uncle Ben Carlson, the event of a Maine nominee. Oh boy, it really goes down. He talked about coverage of conviction it took for Carter to sign the Hyatt Act. Oh yeah, right, he did do that. Well, old Hyatt is now in jail. So different situation. Let's just listen to a little bit of this. We can. A little bit of Jimmy Carter. Here, this is alt message.
Today's episode is sponsored by the President's Inbox, a podcast from the Council on Foreign Relations. Each week, experts, authors, and journalists join Jim Lindsay, the director of CFR's think tank, to help you get a handle on the foreign policy issues facing the United States. Subscribe to the President's Inbox in Apple Podcasts or the podcasting platform of your choice.
Welcome to Off Message. I'm Isaac Dover. You're a Nobel Prize winner. We've talked about North Korea a little bit. There is some talk already among the president's supporters that he should be getting the Nobel Prize for the North Korea communications that he's had so far. How do you feel about that?
Well, not so far, but if President Trump is successful in getting a peace treaty that's acceptable to both sides with North Korea, I think he certainly ought to be considered for the Nobel Peace Prize. I think it would be a worthy and a momentous accomplishment that no previous president has been able to realize.
Today's guest, Jimmy Carter, the 39th President of the United States, 2002 Nobel Prize winner, author of 32 books. The new one is called Faith, and 93-year-old cancer survivor who still has a whole lot to say. Everything about making this one happen was a little bit crazy. I'd reached out to Carter last year hoping to sit down with him. Between his international experience, his approach to politics, he said he voted for Bernie Sanders in the primaries, for example, but he'd taken a more open approach to Trump than most Democrats. He's been all over the world, working on all sorts of things. But he has, as we talked about in this interview, not the best reputation out in the country, and he's always the odd man out among the fraternity of ex-presidents. Carter's staff said no then, but it stayed in my mind. Then, just 2 weeks ago, we heard from Liberty University, the evangelical Christian college in Lynchburg, Virginia, that Carter was going to be there and willing to do a few interviews before delivering the commencement address. Within a few days, it was on the books. The catch, we had to drive 3.5 hours to Lynchburg to do it. But hey, Carter is the first former president to be on the podcast. By the way, we've reached out to the other living ex-presidents, and hopefully those will work out too. And of course, we were willing to do the drive. Well, Zach, producer here, did all the driving through the rain, so he deserves the credit for getting us there. But it was worth it, even once we got to the campus on the morning of the announcement, got lost, and started to get worried that we wouldn't get there in time. But we did. They put us in a room. We started setting up. We had about 15 minutes to get all the mics up. Or so we thought. About 90 seconds after we walked in, they said, "Here comes Carter. Here he comes." And there he was. He ambled over, took a seat on the couch in the room, while we were still scrambling to get everything together, all the wires hooked up. He didn't really laugh at my joke about how neither of us were invited to the royal wedding, which was happening right about when we turned the mics on. His staff told us we'd only get 15 minutes. That's as long as he goes for any interviews these days. They were pretty firm about it, and he still has Secret Service agents with him, so I couldn't push it too much. The interview runs just under 17 minutes. I know, a whopping extra 2 minutes, though we squeezed in a few interesting bits in that extra time. It's our shortest episode yet, I think, though it's action-packed, and I'm really glad we were able to do it. And since we are at Liberty, he wanted to talk a little bit about religion and faith and politics, and that seemed like a good idea. And it gave us a chance to get into the question of moral leadership, which we've explored on the podcast in past episodes, like that one with conservative evangelical leader Tony Perkins a few months back, which I'd encourage you to download now if you haven't. Please check out the article up on the Politico website off of this one, and there you'll see more about the speech that he delivered at Liberty after we spoke, including his opening joke making fun of Trump, and what Jerry Falwell Jr. said he's heard from Trump himself about Carter. It's not what you might expect. And if you haven't done it already, make sure you're subscribing on iTunes or Stitcher or however you're listening. Rate us, leave a comment. All that goes into that algorithm that helps get off message to more and more people. Or just do it directly. Tell someone you know, a family member, a friend, coworker. The people we've got coming in the weeks and months ahead as the midterms get closer are really interesting. You're not going to want to miss any of them. That conversation with Tom Steyer on impeachment activism is coming up. Kirsten Gillibrand.
We'll do a special program on Jimmy Carter and his address at Liberty University there for the commencement. We'll need to do that and talk about this thing, so-called moral leadership, and see where we go. But nonetheless, we'll pause a second here and do the sports. We're kind of running a little behind here. All right, we're going to have to do this over again. Cleveland was in Wrigley Field. Cleveland 10-1. The Padres and Nationals in D.C. Nationals 2-1. Atlanta and the Phillies. Atlanta 3-1 there. The Angels and Blue Jays in Toronto. Blue Jays 5-3. The Pirates and Reds. Reds 7-2. The Marlins and Mets. Marlins 5-1. The Red Sox and Rays in Florida. Red Sox 4-2. D-backs and Brewers in Milwaukee. Brewers 1-0. Shutout to D-backs. The Yankees and Rangers in Texas. Rangers 6-4. The Orioles and White Sox on primary night. White Sox 3-2. The Tigers were in the Twin Cities. Twins 6-0. The Giants and Astros. Astros 11-2. The Royals and Cardinals. Royals 5-1. The Rockets and Dodgers in Los Angeles. Dodgers 5-3. They did escape. And in 10, the Mariners over the Athletics 3-2. But no games in the National Hockey League. And in the NBA, the Houston Rockets defeated by 3 points Golden State in Oakland 95-92. So they are now tied up 2-2. This does it for sports, and we'll have the Jimmy Carter presentation wrapped around this so-called American morality. Reading the book by nonetheless and Mr. Stefan Harpler. That is the man that came in from the cold and the subject of the FBI investigation. This was primary day, May 23rd, 2018. Good day.
Abrams clinching the nomination so far with 76% of the vote. She claimed victory at 9 o'clock on social media. She becomes the first African-American woman in the country to become a major party nominee for governor.
Channel 2's Dave Huddleston continues our live Team 2 coverage, and he's among Abrams supporters downtown Atlanta. Dave, they are fired up, aren't they?
They were fired up, Justin. As you can see behind me, most of those supporters have left for the evening after hearing Abrams give her victory speech, which sounded a lot like a campaign speech. Abrams told the crowd here in downtown Atlanta at the Sheraton that she is grateful and thankful and ready to write the next chapter in Georgia's history.
This was a hard-fought race, and I know for the journey that lies ahead, we need every voice in our party and every independent thinker in the state of Georgia.
Now, many of the supporters I talked with tonight say Abrams has the intelligence, she has the government leadership to lead all Georgians if she becomes the next governor of Georgia. And if she does become governor, of course, she says she is ready to make history for all women. Stacey Kavanaugh came to support Stacey Abrams, knowing if she can win tonight, she could make history by being Georgia and the country's first African-American woman governor.
It's about time. It's about time, and she's the perfect person. To me, she's the obvious choice in this state.
Renee Lovelace says not only that historical significance, but she says Abrams has the governmental experience and also her stance on gun control. Lovelace's son was killed by gun violence in February.
So I'm hoping that she's able to change some of the laws, especially with all of the guns, guns being put in the hands of young people.
Ren Doherty of Cobb County says in addition to all of that, Abrams' platform is pro-business while protecting the importance of families.
I think she has the best experience. I think she also has the best leadership ability.
And again, as you can see, many of the crowd has left here after hearing Abrams' victory speech earlier in the evening. Abrams' staff says, and her supporters say, now the real work begins. They will start making those phone calls, hitting the street, and trying to contact all Georgians for the next part of this election. Reporting live from
Blue again and possibly make history with America's first female African-American governor. Of course, we're talking about Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, just moments ago, she declared victory on Twitter. Our results show her commanding lead over Stacey Evans as the votes continue to be counted. In fact, we've learned that Evans has now conceded, pledging her support to Abrams. Here's a look. Now 39% of the polls reporting here, Stacey Abrams with 74% to Stacey Evans 26%.
We will go live to the Abrams campaign in just a minute, but first let's take a look at the Republican results as they stand right now. Casey Cagle, the lieutenant governor, has the lead right now with 39% of the vote. With 52% of the precincts reporting. We went through it too quickly there, but Brian Kemp is second, Hunter Hill third, Clay Tippins fourth, and Michael Williams fifth with 5%. Of course, the question tonight is, will Casey Cagle be able to win this without a runoff? It's not looking like that at the moment.
Well, we do have live team coverage tonight. We have crews covering both sides of the aisle, and we're going to begin with Fox 5's crew down at the Abrams campaign, where Abrams is speaking now. Let's listen.
Values of faith, of family, of service and responsibility. Hard work is in my bones. And so is a deep respect for those who wake up early and come home tired but ready to read to their kids at night. Or those families that come home just to change clothes to get ready for their second job. And all those who are just getting by, or those who are doing well but worry for the next generation. I have a respect for those who care for their loved ones, or those who've already earned their rest and retirement. A respect for our service members, their families, and our veterans. Our campaign and our work is for them and their security as we shape the future of the state that we love. In this time, Guys, we have a tough race to come. And sometimes we can find it easy to forget about the solid ground beneath our feet. But we must remember that we're in the state where the red clay gives life to generations of dreamers. A state where when Martin marched on ballot boxes and challenged a nation's conscience. A Georgia that gave us the godfather of soul, the queen of the Met, and sent a peanut farmer to the Oval Office. That is our Georgia. And I know you know that as our state's rich and complicated history courses through our memories on nights like tonight when the unexpected becomes the truth, it reminds us of who we are, how we've stumbled, and how we flourished. And it commands that we embrace our obligation to live up to Georgia's tradition of pride and of promise, but to always remember our very complex roots. And together we will shape a future with a boundless belief and historic investment in the children at the very core of every decision we make. That means affordable child care for families and real pathways of opportunity from cradle to career. Because when all of Georgia's children have a chance to reach their potential, regardless of their zip code or their family salaries, we can reach our potential as a state. And we will unleash the full power of our people. That is why public education and public schools must remain the beating heart of Georgia to prepare. We have to propel our young people towards lives of security and happiness and achievement. But even as I speak here tonight, public education is under assault in our state. With our kids and our educators being told to do more and more with less and less. But as the state's public education governor, I will use every tool we have to ensure that we stop shortchanging our children and sabotaging our futures. Because our children deserve better than a basic education. They deserve excellence no matter where they learn. And together, we will deliver.
Stacey Abrams running as a full-throated progressive in a state that has not elected a Democrat to the governor's mansion in 16 years.
To do more than just survive.
She graduated from Yale Law School, the former minority leader of the House. She has a long road ahead of her, but won convincingly tonight, no question about it.
She received a huge endorsement today. Hillary Clinton came out in support of her campaign, and as you heard her making a lot of references to the history and the future of the state of Georgia. She would become, if elected, Georgia's governor, the first African-American female governor in the country.
Let's turn now to the Republicans who she would be running against. I'll show you some of the numbers there. Again, Casey Cagle leading on the Republican side with 39% of the vote, with 52% of the precincts reporting. Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State, at 26%. Hunter Hill trailing in third with 18%.
Well, we want to check in now with Doug Evans, who's downtown at the gathering spot. That's where Stacey Evans' campaign is. And it looks like it's cleared out there already, Doug.
Well, Sine, Stacey Evans is not happy with the outcome tonight, but she is proud of her part in the history that was made here tonight in Georgia. For the first time ever in Georgia history, 2 women were on the Democratic ballot for governor in the state of Georgia. Abrams, as you now know, moves on to the general election in November, and she does so with Evans' full support and congratulations. In fact, Evans told her supporters here tonight to get behind Abrams, give her their full support in November. I talked to Evans about the history that was made here tonight.
Well, it's exciting. I mean, Georgia's never nominated a woman to be the nominee of either party in the governor's race, and so this is a historic night, and I congratulate Ms. Abrams on making history, and I look forward to helping her make even more history in November.
Stacey Evans in her concession speech still talking about the poor little girl who grew up in Ringgold, Georgia, in North Georgia, and she says that she will continue to fight for the dreams of children in Georgia. She, of course, says that she will continue to fight for the Hope Scholarship and restoring that to all of the students in Georgia who had previously been allowed to go to colleges in Georgia under the Hope Scholarship. She says she will continue to see that that is important to her and to the Democratic Party, important to Abrams as well in the election to come. Live in Northwest Atlanta, Doug Evans, Fox 5 News.
All right, Doug, thanks very much. Let's turn back to the Republican side. Casey Cagle has been the lieutenant governor for 12 years. He'd certainly like to be governor, but 4 others would like to deprive him of that opportunity.
That's true. He's been the front runner through most of this. Let's head over now to Morse Diggs, who's with the campaign. And Morse, what are things looking like there at this hour?
Well, a steady rain up here in Gainesville did not keep approximately 300 of his well-wishers from coming out here tonight and talk to him. Many of them have been with his campaigns before. We've got video where he was down here not too long ago greeting those folks, thanking them for their support, gathering all around, and they have been confident all night.
A lot of the reports that just come in obviously just give us some indication, but we clearly are in first place, and I expect us to stay in first place all night long, I can tell you. So we're going to keep pushing, and you guys keep helping us as well. But this is a great night of celebration, regardless of what happens, whether we're in a runoff or not. It's going to be a great, great night.
Now, I spoke to the lieutenant governor out the hallway about 30 minutes ago. He told me he wants to see more of the Metro County vote. He says Gwinnett and Fulton look good. Cobb, he's cautious about that. Let me tell you, he's not just looking for tonight, but he's looking for the race down the road. And here's what he's looking at. This race could actually split some households, with Casey Cagle in a runoff getting the soccer moms, and perhaps the second place finisher will get the husband in the pickup. The reason for that, he's concerned about some of these commercials that have been out there and how far he might have to run to the right. Live from the Casey Cagle campaign in Gainesville, I'm Morse Diggs, Fox 5 News.
To your point, Morse, I'm sure he's aware that Karen Handel won by 11% 8 years ago in this round against Nathan Deal, and then he came back weeks later and beat her in the runoff.
Well, it really is awesome to be here, and
well, he's aware of those numbers, but this is a very fluid situation, and what he's wondering about when he looks at a county like Cobb, a strong conservative county, he's wondering those numbers don't look quite as good right now as Gwinnett or Fulton. And what he's concerned about is, he says, look, can you believe those commercials? That's his concern, and that is he is an establishment, a fully formed conservative, he says, but he's not going to try and gallop all the way to the right and do the gimmicks, that's his word, gimmicks on these commercials. Russ?
All right, Morse, thanks very much.
Well, a lot of conversation has resulted from those commercials.
No question.
We want to go now to Denise Dillon, who is there with the Brian Kemp campaign, with the latest.
yeah, just said that.
Yeah, I can tell you that Brian Kemp, his family, and all of his supporters in this room right now are feeling incredibly good. The numbers are still coming in, of course, but at this point, he looks like he is in a very strong second place. Right now, they're all watching some of those controversial commercials we have seen over the past few weeks. But we have video of when Mr. Kemp first arrived here at the watch party in Athens a little more than an hour ago. He took the podium and stood up there with his wife and his 3 daughters surrounding him, and he was already talking about a runoff.
crowd. Our people are so motivated. They've been working so hard, so we're expecting good things tonight. Just our goal all along for 14 months has been to get in that runoff, and that's what we're hoping for. Well, we'll see how the numbers look tonight, but a runoff's all about turnout and whose people are more motivated. And I think you can see tonight this crowd's motivated.
Now, I was just in the war room with Mr. Kemp. It was him, his consultants, his financial advisor, and everybody else was family. They were all watching those numbers very, very closely. And I did ask him, hey, you know, what are we going to see, or are we going to see anything different if it comes to that runoff? He said his message is going to stay the same. And he says, as you heard him, when it's in a runoff, it all comes down to voter turnout. He feels like he has enough motivated supporters across the state, not just in one central area, but across the state, that will really help him in this campaign. Reporting live in Athens, Denise Dillon, Fox 5 News.
All right, Denise, thanks very much. It looks like it's going to be Cagle and Kemp. Hunter Hill is 8 points behind Brian Kemp, and George Franco is with his campaign tonight. George?
Well, Russ, one of the first things that gubernatorial candidate Hunter Hill told me when I spoke to him briefly is that he thinks it's going to be a long night. We shall see when the polls are all said and done. Right now, we've got supporters gathered here at the Marriott Northwest in Cobb County, where there's still, fair to say, a healthy dose of optimism. Let's go to some video where we see Mr. Hill spent a few minutes shaking hands and thanking supporters one-on-one at around 8:15 or so. Hill was elected to the state senate in District 6, the Smyrna Buckhead area, in 2013. He quit last summer to run for governor after 3 military tours, 2 in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. The former Army Ranger cast himself as a conservative outsider, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-religious freedom, who wants to do away with the state's income tax and be tough on immigration. Supporters told me Hill's military service and leadership on the battlefield and at the Gold Dome made him an easy choice. Mr. Hill obviously was hoping that others saw that as well. Mr. Hill said that he would be governed by his faith and his belief in the fundamentals of this country. We were told that he's expected to make some kind of an announcement shortly, but we're not told obviously what that is. But with the numbers going in the direction that they are going, one can only presume that it's going to be in the direction of conceding. We will let him make that announcement, and when that comes around, we'll also let you folks know. But for now, at the Hunter Hill headquarters, I'm George Franco, Fox 5 News.
Okay, thank you so much, George. Well, let's take a look at some of the other primaries today. 5 candidates running for lieutenant governor. Beginning on the Democratic side here, Sarah Amico, she's in the lead, 55%, to Triana James, 45%, 56% reporting at this point. Let's also take a look at the Republican side in the lieutenant governor race. Here you see where David Schaefer has a significant lead, 48% at this point. Jeff Duncan, 26%. And this is with 56% reporting. So we continue to keep an eye on this.
Yeah, will there be a runoff there? Turning now to the race for Secretary of State, leading now with the Democrats, John Barrow with 52%. Stacey Abrams, can she create enough new voters, do you think, in Georgia to make up for the deficit that the Democrats have seen in the last 16 years in statewide races?
Well, this is a huge win for Stacey Abrams. I mean, she had a strategy from the very beginning to do exactly what you just talked about, Russ, which is to expand the electorate. So she spent a lot of time focusing on Democratic voters, but she also tried to get a lot of new registered voters. Yeah. So it's going to take all of that for her to really put up a competitive race against a Republican in November. But Democrats were excited. You know, we got a person who I think is going to go on and run a good campaign, but also congratulations to Stacey Evans. She's a great Democrat. She's got a bright future, and I really wanted to make sure that, you know, she keeps her head up. But basically, Stacey Abrams is our nominee, and we're going to get behind her.
And she has pledged her support.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Republican side. It seems like a runoff is likely, Phil, but the big questions, at least from the ads that we've seen, seem to be who loves their guns more and who's tougher on immigration.
That's right. You got it. And I think that's why Brian Kemp we see is being propelled into the second spot. He had some great TV ads over the last 10 to 12 days. Of course, Casey Cagle is hanging in there as the #1 slot. And just as a quick analysis, I would think that Hunter Hill could have gotten in this runoff. It's still a little early yet, but Clay Tippins, the outsider, has got around 11%. He's draining from Hunter Hill, and that's, of course, helping Brian Kemp stay in that number 2 slot.
How concerned should Cagle be that the other 4 seem to represent the kind of anti-Cagle block of the Republican Party?
Well, he should be concerned because that's tricky now, even though he's in the number 1 slot. You remember back in 2010 when there was a Republican primary, Karen Handel won the first round with 11 points. And then she faded, and Nathan Deal won by 1 point in the runoff. So it's tricky with regards to turnout, and the alliances can be shifting.
All right, Bill Kent, also Theron Johnson, thank you both for your insights today. We appreciate it.
A rent-to-own store could land you in jail. Yes, that's really happening right here in Texas. Tanya Iser investigates in this WFAA original. Failing to pay a rent-to-own store could land you in jail. Yes, that's really happening right here in Texas. Tanya Iser investigates in this WFAA original.
When you're a mother,
I just want them to have all the things that I didn't have.
The last thing you want is to be separated from your child.
My kids were scared.
DeAndrea Lowe's daughter was a newborn when the cops came for her in 2016.
It was terrifying. It was like we murdered somebody or something.
Lowe, along with her then boyfriend, were charged with felony theft.
I told them I never rented from them, but it was my word against theirs.
Her then boyfriend had rented 2 used TVs and a used Sony PlayStation from a rent-a-center. When the boyfriend didn't make the payments, it was game over.
Because I was like, a felony? Wow.
The arrests were made under Texas laws covering rental contracts, even though Lowe didn't even sign the contract. Both of them were indicted. That's right, indicted after he stopped making payments on rent at electronics.
She wasn't even there at the time when I even rented the stuff.
Critics say state law is on the side of rent-to-own companies. The law presumes that customers who failed to pay may have outright stole the property.
But this is de facto debtor prison type of legislation, whereas someone could actually go to jail for not paying on a contract.
State Rep. Nicole Collier of Fort Worth sits on a House panel looking at overhauling the law.
Law enforcement has their hands full. We don't need them going out there to enforce private contracts.
Private contracts that can involve something as little as a rented couch. LaAngel Eccles is a single mother of 5.
We've never heard of, a law of if you're not making a payment, they're going to issue a warrant for you.
Eccles has successfully completed several rent-a-center agreements.
Those whirlpools are really high.
But she says she lost her job and fell behind on a rented TV.
They are bullies that don't deserve people's money.
But then came the call from a Dallas police detective.
And she told me if I didn't turn it in, that they was going to issue a warrant for my arrest and that I would be prosecuted.
How frightening was that?
It was frightening. It was real frightening. That a felony, I don't, no. My background is completely clean. I would like to keep it that way.
She returned the TV, but the call was terrifying. Plano-based Rent-A-Center is the nation's largest rent-to-own company.
Small payments.
They boast in commercials that they do not do credit checks.
All without credit.
Some say that's the problem.
And to hear that in this day and age, just to me, was absurd.
So when a customer quits paying, the company depends on the cops to step in.
You're putting it back on the taxpayers.
Former Dallas Police financial crimes detective Mike Dana.
You're putting it back on, overtaxed detectives and investigators to basically follow up on a case where you created bad paperwork and you didn't do your due diligence.
We tried to get Rent-A-Center to answer questions on camera. They declined. But this is what one of the company's top lawyers had to say when he appeared last month before a state House committee.
No one is being prosecuted for failing to make their rental payments.
This lawyer might not know about Keith Creer or the dozens of North Texans we found arrested after defaulting on a Rent-A-Center contract.
It is about the return of that product. It is not about collecting money.
Matthew Greenwald told legislators only a fraction of its rental contracts resulted in filed police reports, out of tens of thousands of rental agreements signed in Texas.
99.28% of all of the stolen accounts don't qualify for criminal prosecution under our process.
Rent-A-Center does not tell customers that they could face potential criminal penalties, and it's not in their contracts. Rent-to-own companies are required to put it in big, bold letters on their contracts in other states like Florida.
Without exception, everyone is shocked to learn that they could be criminally prosecuted for this.
Waco attorney Jason Milam told legislators he's represented more than a dozen clients in rent-to-own cases.
This law should be changed.
Should you have ever been indicted to begin with?
No.
It took more than a year, but the charges against Lowe were finally dropped.
You just basically accused me and you lied on me.
Rent-A-Center says it's just protecting its property. But people like Lowe and Eccles say customers deserve to know that rented TV could put them behind bars. Tanya Iser, Channel 8 News.
Candidate for governor, as you can see, she's addressing her supporters right now. Let's listen in.
Thank you so much, Judge Jenkins. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. You know, after many long nights, late nights, and thousands of miles traveling across Texas in my little pickup truck, I'm honored to be here at this moment, fueled by the energy in the room and by the people of Texas. I am so grateful to the thousands of volunteers and activists who helped me, believed in me, and given so much to my campaign. Whether you made a contribution, knocked on doors, called voters, talked to your neighbors, posted on social media, or just got out and voted, thank you, thank you, thank you. Of course, I've got to thank the people who are making this night possible. That's the Downtown Dallas Democrats, the Stonewall Democrats, Dallas County Young Democrats, Dallas Democratic Party, and of course, Ellen's for hosting us this evening. Thank you so much to the many organizations and officials who have lent their name and support to this campaign. To name a few, AFL-CIO, Planned Parenthood, Tejano Democrats, Stonewall Democrats all across Texas, Equality Texas, Gabby Gifford's organization, Julian and Joaquin Castro, 24 state representatives and 3 state senators. I wish I had the time to name them all. And of course, to my darling sweetheart, Lindsay. And there are many more that I am so grateful to your support. But please understand this. No one can do this alone. I also want to thank Andrew White and his team for running a campaign with such passion and spirit. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. I look forward to working with them to achieve our shared goal of giving everyday Texans a voice in Austin and beating Greg Abbott in November. And for those of you whose vote I did not earn in this runoff, hear me. I'm listening to you, and I want to work hard to get your support. Texans from every walk of life, young and old, rich or poor, from big cities to small rural towns, those new to the political process, and those who have engaged for years. All of us together, we're going to fight for change. Together, we're going to make it happen. A stronger and fairer Texas, a tolerant and diverse Texas, a Texas where the everyday person has a voice and a fair shot, just as I did. As you well remember, I grew up the daughter of migrant workers in the poorest neighborhood in San Antonio. But because I got a quality public education, had the honor of serving in the military, and had a living wage and health care when I needed it, I got a fighting chance. And now I'm running for governor to make sure that every Texan also has that same fighting chance. Honestly, I am sick and tired of politicians to when they win, when their attitude is, I got mine, too bad about you. I got mine, too bad about your health care, too bad about your public education, too bad about your living wage. I need a governor, and I'm going to be that governor who will say, now let me find a path for you. Let me find a path for your health care. Let me find a path for your living wage. Let me find a path for your public education. But there is no real opportunity without security. The security of food on the table, keeping the job if you're sick, and of course, having our children being able to go to school and return back home.
And you've been listening to the victory speech from Lupe Valdez. She has been declared the winner in the race to be the Democratic candidate for Texas governor, beating her opponent, Mr. White.
And she will meet up with Governor Greg Abbott in November.